Hello YouTube, this is Los Angeles Prepper, and wanted to talk about this tragedy in Florida today. I actually just made probably a 15-minute video about it. I didn't really like the way that I was expressing myself. I realized that a lot of the things that I was talking about are complex issues. So I decided, instead of to tell you how I feel about it, I'm just going to talk about a couple of subjects and ask you for your input on what you think about it, because a lot of these issues are really not black and white, right or wrong. They're complex issues. So, without further ado, first topic I want to talk about, homeschooling. Something I've been thinking about for a while, and I have to admit, I used to think it was ridiculous, right? Maybe if you live in the country and there's not really any real schools, and it's like your kid's the only 10th grader in school anyways, what's the difference if you teach them or they teach them or something? But I used to not think much of it. And then, the older I got, the more I thought about school, how much time you have to spend in school, and kind of what you get out of K through 12 versus the energy you put into it. I began to think, you know what? Maybe these homeschoolers are onto something, right? Maybe it's not the craziest idea in the world. So an event like this, it makes me think about that. I don't have kids, I'm not even married, but I do think about things ahead of time, like, starting a family and such, because it takes planning. Families are expensive, for one. Wives can be expensive too, as well as husbands. I don't know who's more expensive in general. I guess it depends on the person. I won't start that argument, but I can start. The older I get, the more I can see the appeal of homeschooling. Just to kind of increase the quality of education, have a little bit more control over the subject matter, and not to say I would try to lead my child into an ideology, although I might try to steer them away from ideologies like communism, being the patriotic American that I am, but I would still teach them about it because I think it's important, I think it's important. And I think that school just really doesn't, it's just too archaic. It's so... if you wanted to change what's in a textbook, like say you wanted to add a paragraph about Amazon jungle, I don't know. It could take you years. Maybe they're cutting down we know they're cutting down too many trees in the Amazon jungle because they're making all this palm oil, right? Let's say you just wanted to add a paragraph in a science book about that. It could potentially take you, I don't even know how long, to get the school to change the curriculum. And you could spend all this time and money on lawyers and all this shit, and it would never even happen. So if you're homeschooling your kids, you can just make that part of your science thing that day for whatever grade you feel is appropriate. I think you still have a minimum amount of that you have to cover, but anyways, those are a couple things I think about homeschool. What do you guys think about homeschool? Second topic, protection. An event like this makes me think about all those EDC videos I see, and I guess everyone that does an EDC video either has a concealed carry permit or lives in a state where you can carry, because you don't see a lot of people in California talking about EDC unless they have concealed carry, because we're not an open carry state, so a little bit different for us. But just a terrible event like this, when someone has a firearm and they're doing harm to a lot of people, it makes me think about carrying. So what about you, YouTube? Do you carry every day? Are you in a state that allows you to carry every day? Have you gotten your CCW? I know how a couple of my subs feel about firearms, but I don't know how all of you feel about it. So I'd be curious to hear, do you carry every day? Have you thought about carrying every day? Excuse me, do you carry knives every day? It doesn't necessarily have to be a firearm. Some people carry mace and other things. Excuse me. But what do you think about protection and EDC in that sense? Saw a really interesting video. A guy was talking about a staff Oh man, he loved this staff. He's like holding it. I'm like, it was the staff was a part of him. But anyways, lots of different types of protection. You know, and in the since we're talking about these kids, you know, would you ever encourage your kid to carry some type of personal defense weapon at school? Maybe a can of mace. You know, you're not. I don't even know if kids at a high school could carry a can of mace on them legally. I wonder. You know, you're not allowed to take weapons into school, but I don't know if they include that. Probably depends on the school, or state law or federal law. You know. But what do you think about that? Number 3, guns. Of course, when there's a tragedy like this, the focus of the topic very quickly shifts to guns. Where did he get the guns? Are there too many guns in the country? We have to control the guns. We have to control this type of gun or this type of magazine or this type of round, or how you can purchase them, how many you can purchase, what type you can purchase, and on and on and on. What do you think about guns, YouTube? You probably know how I feel about guns if you watch enough of my videos. I think that law-abiding citizens should be able to exercise their Second Amendment right, basically unencumbered. In California, I can't do that. In some states, you can't do that. But I'm not gonna go around open carry if the state doesn't want me to open carry. That's how you lose your firearm rights for life, and I'm not looking to do that. So, how do you feel about guns, YouTube? I'm curious. Do you think having more guns means we're going to have more violence? Do you think we need to be more careful about who gets guns? Do we need to have more training? What do you think? Number 4, violence. Violence is an unfortunate part of society, but I don't think something that's ever going to go away. Now, this act of violence was committed with a gun, but acts of violence are committed daily, you know, probably by the hour or minute if you really want to get down to it. I'm going to talk about the media coming up, but you know, violence does exist, and there are a lot of reasons that we prep. Of course, preppers are always worried about running out of food and water and security, but I think, now this is just my personal opinion, but I would suspect most preppers worry more about security post shit hits the fan than pre shit hits the fan. You know, most preppers are thinking about, how do I defend my stash from starving people after the power goes out, rather than how do I protect my stash from the guy who's trying to rob me down the street. You know, hopefully you have some good near-term security solutions as well as long-term security solutions, but that's just kind of a little guess of mine. Maybe preppers think the opposite. Maybe they're just as prepared for today as they are for tomorrow. I'm not sure. But moving on, number 5, control. Do you support more control, a more controlled school environment and more controlled society, more law enforcement, Big Brother, if you will, you know, 1984-esque, right? Or do you support more freedom, or does it kind of depend on the circumstance? Can't say gotta be careful. Might have Toastmasters people watching, or people that used to work in media. Make a little list right here. Tally. What do you think about control or freedom? I understand that a certain amount of order in society can be useful. Like having traffic lights is useful. Not allowing a 20-story motel next to this apartment complex, you know, is useful. That's kind of nice. But at the same time, it's nice to have freedom too. We have a lot of laws in this country, a lot of laws, a lot of regulations, and it just kind of gives me headaches just to think about it. I mean, I was looking up some vehicle codes regarding spark arresters today, and trying to read through the language was just unbelievable. So what do you think, YouTube? More control, more freedom, a good balance? Does it depend on the situation? Probably depends on a lot of things, but what do you think? Number 6, the media. Look at this word. I think this is a really disrespectful word. Bloodbath? I don't ever want my child to be referred to as a bloodbath. That's really gross. That's just really gross, you know. I can understand it being on the front page. I can understand the picture. Nothing wrong with the picture, kids evacuating. I can understand bold letters, the color red. Now, granted, red is a color that Drudge often uses to talk about violence. Perhaps when we're talking about kids getting shot up, we don't need to use red, and maybe we don't need to use words like blood and bath. Um, was there blood everywhere? Yeah, there probably was. Do you need to have a title saying blood everywhere? No, you really don't. I would advise you to not watch stories about this, to be perfectly honest. If you want to learn about what happened, maybe read an article or two if you're really desperate to know. But I would try to avoid coverage of it because I just I'm not sure it's going to make that much of a difference, and I'm not sure you're going to feel like a more complete person as a result. Um, just my 2 cents. What do you think? Do you think the media, and actually, I wanted to kind of talk about the media and guns and violence. Do you think the media glorifies using guns and violence to achieve your means? And do you think it has an effect on our populace? They used to think video games, violent video games like Doom and Goldeneye and stuff, were going to make kids go crazy and do God knows what. Well, there are many millions and millions of kids that play Call of Duty and don't go out and do things like this. So I'm not sure how strong the science is, but I'm curious what you think about the media in its coverage of events like this. What do you think about the media as far as glorifying guns, violence? And I don't mean just news. I mean movies, television, print media, all types of media. Even YouTube to a certain extent. YouTube counts as media, digital media, blogs and Twitter. I'm sure people are going to be tweeting and about guns, and Reddit's going to be blowing up about pro-gun and anti-gun, and it's just going to be a big battle, right? Last and certainly not least, mental health. I believe it was Reagan a number of years ago defunded the portion of the mental health facilities in this country. I think a large portion. And some critics of that funding cut have argued that it has increased crime to some extent. Now, I'm not sure if those type of mental services would have necessarily been something that this young troubled man would have had access to. He would have had very rudimentary counseling at high school. Probably not a doctor, probably just someone, maybe with a marriage family therapist certificate, maybe not, could have just been someone with a bachelor's, maybe not even that. You never know. I don't think that the media is going to be looking very in depth into the quality of counseling available at the school, although it's certainly, be worth something. But in the last video that I made, I made a point that took me about 10 minutes to articulate, and I'll see if I can do better this time, that I think a lot of analysis done on events like this is very superficial. They talk about how he acted and he was an outcast, or he gave off this impression. There's going to be a lot of focus on guns and things like that. But I think one thing that's unfortunate is that I'm not sure this country has a specific kind of plan, if you will, for trying to reduce the number of incidents like this. And not necessarily through control, but through understanding and preventative measures. Do kids that drop out of high school have a higher rate of losing it? Do kids that have less friends in high school have a higher rate of doing crazy shit? Was there a problem with, was he getting bullied? Was there an environment where other students were causing stuff? Were there other students, like one of this article said everyone predicted it, which is kind of it's a little early to be talking about stuff like that. But if that's true, did the school ever talk with the students about, if you see a student that something talk to us about it. Is there a national program? Do we need to start talking about, you know, see something, say something? It's not like I don't want to turn the entire populace of this country into a bunch of paranoid people that call the police every time their neighbor's acting funny. Okay, that's not the way it's supposed to work. But at the same time, we do need to be vigilant as citizens, whether or not you're young or old or a kid in high school or middle school or college or whatever. We all need to be vigilant. And to kind of bring it back to the whole mental issue thing, it's in our society, it's somewhat seen as a touchy subject. Even if your friend's a little bit down, you might go hang out with them, you might try to cheer them up, you might get them their favorite thing. But I would suspect that the majority of people, if their friend has been down kind of for a while, would feel comfortable going up to them and saying, "Hey, you seem like you've kind of been a little down recently. Do you want to talk about it?" Now, if you have good friends that'll do that for you, power to you. I really hope that everyone watching this has good friends like this. And if you don't, keep looking, because good people like that are out there. But the point I'm making is, in a lot of instances, when terrible things like this happen, you kind of see a history of struggles, an individual struggling in life in a variety of ways, not necessarily just financially or socially or emotionally or maybe even physically, but I think our society has become very inwardly focused. I gotta get to work, I gotta make my money, I gotta pay my bills, I gotta do my own thing, live in my own apartment, et cetera, et cetera. And I in this whole digital wave, I don't know if we're in the third or fourth digital wave. I think the third digital wave with the cell phone, and the fourth digital wave is going to be automation. And everyone looking at their phones, looking at their screens, checking their email, checking their Facebook, there's less organic empathy for each other. We're spending, I think, less time around people, less quality time around people. If you see your friend for an hour once a month, or a couple hours once a month, how well are you going to be able to connect with them, in a couple hours, versus trying to spend a little bit of more, like going on a hike with someone versus grabbing a coffee with someone. More people are getting coffee with their friends than are spending all day going on a hike with their friends. And I think that's really having a negative influence on our psyche. Because I don't believe our psyche is really cut out for this 40, 50-hour week, rushing here and there, living month by month, renting. I don't think our psyche, I think, is very naturally wants us to kind of do our own thing, take care of ourselves, put in a little bit of work into life, but not have to deal with all this bullshit that's coming at us at all times. Just the density, all the rules and regs and global economic conditions and local stuff. Life's kind of crazy, right? Life is kind of intense. Even if you have your shit together, life is a little intense. So I don't know if society is moving in a direction where we're getting stronger. I think we're getting less strong as a people. We're not taking care of ourselves as much. We're not as sufficient as we used to be. We're becoming just mindless little robots in the machine. Somebody says crank the wheel and get your little snack, and we crank the wheel, and we get our little snack, and we crank the wheel, and we get our snack. And as long as we get our snacks when we crank the wheel, everything's fine. But are we really trying to escape out of that? Are we trying to grow as people? Are we becoming stronger, better, more self-sufficient people, or just becoming better gears for a bigger machine? Deep questions without easy answers. Now, this is kind of one of my longer videos as of recent, but Sometimes something happens and it just makes you think a little bit about life, makes you appreciate what you have, because life is very unpredictable. You really never know what can happen at any time, which is why I try to encourage people around me to really carpe diem and get the most out of life. Just put energy towards life, no matter what it is. Even if you're struggling with stuff, if you're doing things that are challenging, things you've never done before, things you have no idea how to do, just try it. Put energy into it. You don't have to love it. You don't have to become perfect at it, but you'd be surprised if you try something a few times and you get a little bit better, and you try again, you get a little bit better. Pretty soon you might be somewhat decent at it. So until then, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this stuff, and I'll see you next time.